I think every sim racer just needs to experience VR. It's the first time I used it, it's like you feel like you're sitting in the car, you're just looking, you're like, oh my God, what's going on?
So wondering, how do you prepare, like how do you get more performance? Like there's practice and telemetry and the setup of your rig, but also the car. What else? Do you sleep well, or do you train, or?
So it's going to be a little bit all three of those. So being on a team's huge because you can bounce ideas off your teammates. You can lean on them. You can watch their laps, how they're entering a corner, exiting a corner, where they're braking, where they're getting back on the gas. That's all integral to finding those last few tenths to get to the top.
The biggest leaps and bounds that I'm finding is actually in telemetry and also following better drivers. So, for example, we have the Bathurst 12 hour coming up in a couple of weeks, so we're starting to really knuckle down and do some more practice.
Definitely practice with the team and work on setups in the sim. We do study the telemetry. People like a little bit different things too in the driving styles. So some people like certain things in the setup differently, but it takes a lot of time to figure that out and build the setups for each track and all the different conditions. So yeah, it helps having a team to work with on that.
I think it's a mix. I mean, obviously hardware can help, but I think people like to believe that hardware helps more because it's more fun to buy hardware than practicing. But I think in the end, it's all about practice and using your time to practice effectively. Like just doing laps it will make you better, but if you repeat the same mistakes every lap, then that won't make you quicker. So I think it's probably like in real motorsport. You need to work with telemetry, see what you can improve, study what others are doing, try to copy that, and yeah.
With equipment, obviously having a nice PC and nice steering wheel, pedals, and everything, or visuals too. For me, obviously, like the virtual reality is key for dirt racing. But yeah, I would say it doesn't make you really faster, but maybe more consistent, which is helpful. The good equipment, but yeah, it's important to a point, I suppose. There's definitely some really fast guys that are on entry level stuff as far as steering wheels and pedals and stuff, but yeah, you gotta be able to see what you're looking at. If you're on a PC that can't run certain frames per second, it might be a little bit of a challenge.
And how does VR fit into performance? I think you mentioned it a little bit, but do you think it can go faster with VR compared to triple screens or ultra wide? Or not to say faster, but how does it relate?
Yeah, I mean, for me, absolutely. I've tried. You can see the rig behind me. I have triples, and I've tried. I just can't have the same spatial awareness and spot the apexes that I need to. And when you're racing against other people is the biggest thing, especially if you're racing in like the dirt sprint cars or the off road like we're in, or some rally where your car's sideways and you're racing other people. Being able to look around, because the triples only have so much. You can't just turn your head a little more and get more. Like when you're in VR, and especially the Pimax already has the big FOV, so you can turn your head and be able to know where that car is right next to you and set up a pass or a something. So it's, yeah, I think a huge advantage, and it can be used in road and everything too. I like it. I mean, we've done the Daytona 24 and I did my stints all in the VR, so no problem.
I would say that I'm about one for one swapping between VR and um, the triples. On my ultra wide, not as confident because I can't place the car as well to my surrounds. So there's certain corners, like if you're coming up to hairpins and whatnot, you can't place the car because you can't see where you're actually trying to apex, for example. So that's just one example. Obviously, when you're battling cars and you need to do a quick check, you've got the spatial audio of the VR headset that also helps, but then you can literally just turn your head 10, 15 degrees and you know exactly where that car is. So you're not questioning your placement. You're not questioning closure rates. There's just so many aspects of VR that make it the ultimate sim racing experience.
In the end, you want to see what's going on to your sides. Like when you are in a battle and there's a car next to you with VR, you can just look. That's awesome. With triples, you can just look. With ultra wide, you still have to use like a button, look left, right. I think that kills the immersion a little bit. I mean, obviously for performance, it's still fine. But I mean,
Important. You know, a lot of guys run on triple screens. Some guys still run on single screens, but running VR is absolutely just. I could not run without VR, especially in the dirt road side of things. Being able to look into a corner and racing rallycross cars and trucks, we're sideways a lot. So I'm looking out the side windows more than I'm looking out the front window. So having VR is absolutely integral to success.
oh my God, what's going on? And I think that's great. I mean, there are a few pros that use VR, but I think the majority is probably on triples, mainly for facts like the view is locked and the braking markers will always be 100% reproducible, because obviously if you look slightly different, if your position slightly different, it might change. But we are talking about the highest level of esports there, where it might make a difference. I mean, at my level, there's definitely. I'm personally a little bit quicker in VR, maybe because it's just more fun to drive in VR, because you're more immersed and you're more like in the zone, you know. Because obviously, if you have triples, if you have an ultra wide, you still see your surrounding, and I think it's not as easy to focus on what's going on compared to when you're really in the car.
People talk about VR, and then it's very hard to describe VR for. It's very hard to show what it's like to wear VR. So how would you describe VR?
You can't explain it. Like I've tried to explain it and you can't. Like basically, when you're sitting in the screens, it's 2D. You're still in your living room. When I put on the VR, I try and explain, it's like putting on the helmet, when you're in the car. It's when I put it on to get in. It's like you're transported into the car. You're not sitting in your living room looking at screens. So the immersion is just on such another level. And then I also have a haptic feedback pad on my seat too, so I can feel the rumble strips and things. The Next Level made a pad for my rig it's awesome. So yeah, you're just totally immersed in it. You can feel everything, and the heart rate's up. You're racing for real. It's by far the best way for me.
Yeah, you can watch a video, but it doesn't really do it any justice. The way I tell my friends when I say I race in VR, it's like you're actually in the car. Like I'm holding this steering wheel here, and in the game I'm also holding the steering wheel, obviously. So it's like you're actually there. You can look around. You can, see the other cars next to you. You can see the the gear shifter down below. It really puts you in the action, and I can't imagine racing on screens after being in VR for so long.
Yeah, I think the same for me. I sometimes I was try to look at, like, I'm wearing a watch, and then I'm in the game, want to look at my watch, and it's not there. But then okay, I'm not really here.
It's funny, when my dad tried it for the first time. He used to race dirt oval cars in real life way back in the day, and he was driving, and some mud got on the visor, and he went up to pull the tear off like he would in real life. It was funny because he's like, he really felt like he was in the car.
Like the first time, I remember when I got the Reverb G2 and I was playing DCS for the first time, and like I was so totally, I was doing 6-hour flights at this point, and I just remember this one time that I pulled up. I landed F-16 it was, and I pulled up at the end of the runway, and I had to hit the brakes a bit harder than I was expecting, and so my monitor is 580 mils away. I nearly headbutted the monitor. Like, there's no reason for me to do that. But I nearly headbutted the monitor because that's what my body was telling me is going to happen. So it actually happened. Yeah, I was like, whoa. I had to have a breather and go get a water. It was pretty amazing.
And which VR headsets have you tried?
I haven't done a lot of VR, to be honest. I also have the HP Reverb 2 here, which is also decent. The Oculus Quest 3, the newest one. I don't know. 2, 3, one of those. I'm not exactly sure. I just tested it briefly. But I mean, the benefit that the others have is they are a little bit lighter. The Pimax is heavy and huge. Can be a little bit problematic with these bucket seats. sim racers like to use. But if you have a normal seat, it's obviously no problem. But out of all the headsets that I have tried, I think the Pimax is the only one that I tried where you don't notice any pixels. I mean, I can't see it. I mean, if you really look closely, if you're nitpicking, maybe, but not when you're really immersed in the car. And yeah, it's really nice.
So when I very first started, I got a hand-me-down original Oculus, like the CV1. It was like the first headset, and that's what got me into it. But quickly I bought the next Oculus. It was just in their newer version. It was the Rift S, I think. And then I got an HP after that. My uncle had a Valve Index. I tried one of those. And then I got the 5K, the Pimax 5K Super. And then obviously now the Crystal. So that's my evolution of headsets. I went through a lot of them. But I was always just trying to find, the best picture. And then once, like the HP had a pretty small field of view compared to the other ones. It had a decent picture, but the field of view was a lot more narrow than the previous ones I had. And then when we got in the Pimax, it was like amazing because it's, obviously much more field of view. And that's actually pretty awesome when you're in the car and can see all around you. So, yeah, it's been quite a journey. I'm looking forward to the next gen already. I just want to keep seeing it get better.
Do you race for enjoyment or performance? Like, would you enjoy a race you didn't perform super well, or how's that balance for you?
Well, I will say winning is fun. So when I don't win, it's hard for me to say I had fun. But I mean, I do. At the end of the day, it is a hobby. It is something I do for enjoyment. I mean, I do just like I think the flight sim guys would probably say the same thing. You do. It makes you a better driver. Like when I go jump in my car, or if I take my car to the track, those skills are transferable. So it is a little bit of both, and then obviously the competitiveness in me really enjoys trying to get to the top and take the W's.
Yeah, yeah, I do remember when I started iRacing. Then before I went karting with colleagues, it was okay, but then after 3 years of iRacing, I just butchered them.
Yeah, I love that. Everyone's always very confident going to the work after work karting, and then you give them the smoke.
Racing, is it for you enjoyment thing, or is it performance, or do you enjoy a race where you didn't perform super well, or like do you get stressed, or how's that balance?
Well, I may be a bit of a masochist, but I actually, so something you don't know about me as well, Job. I'm on the committee of the biggest league in the Southern Hemisphere, right? Biggest iRacing league, and I actually run the endurance side of it. And to break it down into two parts, the actual racing for me, I thrive on endurance racing. I don't like the sprint format too much because I find that really brings out the people not caring as much about others. Endurance racing, you get a lot more caution. People seem to use their brains a bit more, and there's a bit more the survival instincts kick in. Whereas in sprint racing, you find people just will do whatever they can and flip a coin a lot of the time, where you don't find that as much in endurance racing. And then on the other side of the stick, running the league, so it's probably 15 hours a week to me, I'd say, being part of the committee, and I find a lot of enjoyment from actually believing that I'm making the racing better for everyone else. So if I didn't think that I could improve everyone else's week by giving the time that I am, I wouldn't do it. So that's where that lands, I guess.
Yeah, that's why sim racing and all those online games are like the communities are so amazing, because people like you are like contributing to that.
Yeah, no, it's great. And honestly, so many people do get their hands dirty, and there is a lot that goes into running. Like, we're actually a not-for-profit, so there's the funds going in and out are very minimal. So the few that get their hands dirty end up doing a lot of legwork. But it's great.
Yeah, in many ways it's super similar to like real offline races, like the organization and the teams and but can you still enjoy a race if you don't perform well, or
Yeah, I do get a little sour when I don't do good or bad things happen, but that's just racing. You know, you race enough, you figure that out, and you'll have your good and bad races. It's just how it goes. You can't win them all, but yeah, sometimes it stings when you think you can win and you can't do it or something like that, or you can definitely get down on it at times. And I do take it very serious. You know, everybody on our team is very competitive. You know, you want to win, and at the highest level you can. So, but yeah, it's still mostly for fun and a hobby for me.
But still, a lot of esporters, they still prefer to use triple screens or maybe ultra wides. Is that a matter of time, or
Well,
what do you think?
so the big thing, that's a really easy one, and coming back to comfort. So these guys, these professional esports drivers, you have to remember that we spend 40, 60, 70 hours a week on our 9 to 5. These guys, their job is racing, and for them to put themselves in an environment where even though we find it quite comfortable for 3 hours, like I do 3 hour stints in VR all the time in my enduros, but to do that 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours a day straight, 5-6 days a week, it's probably not something that most sim racers would consider at a professional level, unfortunately, at the moment.
There was like a couple NASCAR guys that used it, but I don't know about any on road at times, and I don't think there's any NASCAR currently. But yeah, I think it could go that way with those guys eventually. There's already, because on the other sides of iRacing Pro Series, the Sprint Car Series is half the field or more is in VR. And then same with the off-road, which I race, and Rally has several people. So it might have a little bit to do with just what they need to see, but I think as the tech gets better, like with the new headsets, like this Crystal, that more of the road guys are going to start transitioning. I think Pro Series guys, they're so stuck in ways they see a winning recipe and they would just try and copy it. So they're afraid to take that change, I think. But I'm pretty sure a few of those guys would probably love VR and do well in it.
I mean, I think eventually VR will take over, honestly, because the majority of people are just casuals trying to be immersed in the game, and it's not even close compared to triple screens. I used to run a crazy triple 55-inch OLED setup that is like really, it looks impressive, but it's just like still, it's not even close compared to VR. And I think eventually it will definitely take over when it gets a little bit less complicated to set up. I still think VR sometimes the entry burden, or how do you call that? If you have a monitor, you start the game, you play. If you have VR, you start the game, and then you have to figure out settings and what can I improve, because I think the VR headsets are a little bit further in technology than what computers can do. Like even with the freaking fastest PC on iRacing, it's still, you still get 30 FPS at Daytona in the infield. I mean, even on monitors. So I think as hardware evolves and maybe as headsets get more user-friendly, it will eventually take over for not only for sim racing, I think for everything that is simulating real life.